All right, good afternoon. I'm Zach Payne from AFCEC here in San Antonio, Texas, and I have with me Mr. Brian Stives from AFICA, also here in San Antonio. Some ground rules for this briefing here. All the audio will be coming from our end over DCO, and then if you have any questions throughout, please type them into the chat box. We will take them down and answer them at the end once we get through the briefing. So if anything I say throughout doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to reach out to us via way of the chat box, and we'll get you an answer at the end. And once this is all done, we are recording it, and we will have this published to YouTube within the next couple of days if you have folks out there in the field that couldn't get on. But first off, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about the construction tasking order process today. Just a little background on myself. And where I've come from. I'm here at AFCEC now, but prior to this, I was a deputy BC and an engineering flight chief at the base. So in terms of execution, this is what I know and what I've been doing recently. So that's kind of my perspective, and what we've modeled here in the construction tasking order process. I think you guys out at the bases now will see that there's a lot of similarities. That's how we did it at the base. Now we're just trying to roll it up to a strategic level process that we can all relate to and follow. All right, so strategic intent on the front end. The goal of the CTO was to establish a comprehensive, sustainable, and transparent process for centralized funding the portfolio management. So the centralized portfolio, it's no secret that our budgets have been dropping over the last couple of years, right? And the Air Force has decided to take risks specifically in a lot of the things that the civil engineer career field's responsible for, a lot of our infrastructure. And so FY15 is a historical low, and it doesn't look like it's going to get much better anytime sooner after that. So as a result of that, the Air Force decided to centralize dollars at the Air Force level, and so that we could apply the next dollar to the next greatest risk across the enterprise. So we're not going to be doing it locally at the installation or MAJCOM. We're going to take a look at the whole Air Force and make sure that dollars are going to the right place. And how we do that, we're going to prioritize our requirements based on our risk to mission, risk to force, and then a third component, and I'll talk about that a little later, is, no kidding, what makes good business sense, what's going to save us money. So the bottom line is construction tasking order cycle is the foundation of the centralized control, decentralized execution of the program. So construction tasking order, familiar process. The keys here, the key takeaways that the corporate body said was important with centralization is that, one, we are going to be able to move our obligations to the left. So all you guys at the base, contracting, CE, we all know that once we hit mid-August into September, get ready to put your overtime in and get to work, because we're going to be working some long hours all the way up into the end. We've done a little better over the last few fiscal years and moving the hard close or hard end of year a couple of weeks early, maybe to mid-September, but we're still used to that last big push. And that's probably always going to exist, but our goal over this centralized process is to move that push farther to the left, so it's happening in the middle of the fiscal year. And to do that, we're going to get on a cycle where we have a 2-year program where we're being very deliberate about what requirements we're executing and how we're executing them, and we're going to take our time to do it right. That benefits all of us, right? So if we have time to design a requirement on the front end, the output when we take the construction requirement to the contracting office and actually build it out, there's a lot of value added there. There's less cost growth, less time growth on a requirement. So those are two of the efficiencies that we said we'd be able to realize with centralization. Well, we haven't got there yet. And after a year and a half, going on 2 years of centralizing the program, we're not there yet. And a big reason for that is that we don't have this deliberate process laid out. We centralized the dollars, but we didn't centralize the execution process that we're all familiar with at the base. The civil engineer, the contracting office, and the FM, at least when I was at base level, we met on a weekly basis, and we walked through every single requirement and the status of it and when we wanted or were shooting to have it awarded. And we did that on a weekly basis, so everyone was on the same page. We communicated the process, allocated resources accordingly to make sure that we were meeting those dates and taking care of the program. What we did here when we centralized from a strategic level is we just centralized the money and kind of piecemealed how we were doing the execution. And the whole point of this is to fix that. All right, so I won't dive into this too much, but you see there on the slides is the 6 steps to an air tasking order cycle. And if you've went through Air Command and Staff College or some other PME, you may have seen this and might be familiar with it. But the air tasking order is what we do over in the AOR. And that's how we basically conduct our flying missions when we're fighting the war. We develop an air tasking order and go on a day-by-day basis to make sure that we're executing and hitting the right targets. Well, while it's not the same, there are similarities between what we do in terms of those key steps. You know, on the front end, the strategic intent, well, our combatant commander in the field is going to lay out his priorities, his goals, his objectives. Well, we have the same thing, right? We know that we have energy mandates that we have to meet. We know that we're concerned about risk to airmen or risk to mission. We know that those things are out there. Our senior leaders, General Welsh, has told us that. And so our goal, our job is to help turn that into an executable strategy. So we do that by identifying targets, you know, and in an AOR those might be targets that we're going to go drop bombs on, but for us it's our different requirements, our different construction projects that are going to address those risks and help us achieve those goals. With the weaponeering piece, it's all about the right weapon to achieve the effect. That could be an F-15, it could be a missile, it could be a bunch of different things in the AOR. Well, what do we have for our weapons? We have different agents, right? The base, you guys are good at a lot of things. AFCEC's good at some things. The Corps' good at things. We have a bunch of different contract vehicles. So the key is putting the right vehicle, right agent all together to take out the target. And then the CTO development piece, it's all about time on target and when the optimal time to obligate a requirement is. You know, when we're developing ATO, the number one target's not always the first one that gets taken out. It could be the 2nd through 10th target because those we can attack at any time, but we have to wait till nightfall to take out the number one target. Well, it's no different in our program, right? We have Sabre IDIQ type requirements. Well, we know that we can execute those quickly. They're low threat to us, so we might as well take those out early, even if the number one priority has to wait a little bit. And the number one priority is going to wait. Right now we have an $80 million runway project that we're shooting towards at Dover Air Force Base. Well, that $80 million project takes time, and it's going to take us time to go through the acquisition. So we might not be ready for that until the middle or end of 3rd quarter. Well, that doesn't mean we don't want to spend our money and take care of the other targets that we can now. And then the last 2 is all about executing that plan and then coming around on the back end and making it better. All right, so the targeting piece to this, and I want to foot stomp a couple of things here. And we've received feedback both obviously from the engineering community as well as the contracting, is that, you know, we're changing our priorities every single year. You know, what's important, it kind of depends on what's trending at the time. Is it, you know, fire suppression systems? Is that what's important to us because we had an inadvertent failure, or is there you know, did an airman fall down the stairs, so we need to take care of our dorms a little better? There's different things out there that seem to drive the model and how we prioritize projects. Well, the big change now is that we fix that, and the fix is a 2-year integrated, risk-based integrated priority list, and it focuses on 2 main things, right? The risk, the probability of something failing, so based on the age, condition, etc., what are the chances that our asset's going to fail? We know that stuff from an engineering perspective. We're pretty good at that. And then the consequence of failure, so what happens if that asset does fail? And based on that, we can prioritize our requirement based on a level of risk. Now there's a 3rd dimension there that I mentioned earlier, and that's the cost savings. So if we have 2 similar requirements, we want to do what makes the best business sense, and it's going to save us money in the long run. But the key here is that we brief this, our SES briefed this just this week to the 3 stars, the MAJCOM CVs, and they ate it up. They ate it up because it makes sense. And so from that perspective, we might be tweaking this a little year to year, but this isn't an enduring process that's going to help us establish our targeting list as we go from year to year. So from that targeting list, we create an IPL, an integrated priority list, and that's all it is. It's based on that score, their risk score that we develop, and it's a 1 to N list. And those are the targets that we want to get after in a given fiscal year based on the available dollars. So from there, we weaponeer it. I mentioned that earlier. It's about the right aircraft to take out a target. Well, for us, it's the right contract vehicle, the right method. What vehicle is going to help us achieve the desired effect? Who has the capacity to execute a requirement, or more importantly, maybe who is the best at doing a requirement? Who's the most capable? Do we want to rely on a center of excellence through the Corps of Engineers, or are we pretty good at and confident in our capabilities at the base to do it? So from that, we lay in our execution agent as well as the contract vehicle, and again, like I mentioned, appropriate delivery method and vehicle for the requirement. We have a planned effort to meet some of our small business goals from a strategic perspective, but at a deliberate approach to make sure that we're maximizing Air Force resources first before we send money outside the Air Force to other available agents like the Corps, NAFAC, GSA. Once we have the targets weaponeered, it's all about adding that time on target date. And we're going to do that in a few different ways, but some key pieces there, we're going to look at the contract vehicle and how you're executing it. That's one way, because we know, as I mentioned before, SABRE and IDIQ are quicker than others. We're also going to look at the PA. Some requirements are going to take a little longer than others, and we know that. There's different thresholds and different approvals before we can award a contract, and more scrutiny in those larger acquisitions that might drive that acquisition time frame to the right. So we know that, but from there and from our experience, we're going to lay in some times on target. And the key, though, for those times on target is to enable you guys at the installation. On the front end, we're going to give you authority to go advertise all these requirements, but on the back end, we want to give you a time on target date that you guys can shoot for. And so that'll help you prioritize. If you have a dozen projects at your base, it'll help you prioritize your workload amongst your PMs and your contracting officers to see what's important and to help drive towards those time on target dates and allocate resources accordingly. And with respect to the time on target date, what we're talking about there from our end is that is the date when we want you guys at the base to send us a request for funds. Right? We want you to send us. That means you have a bid in hand that you've accepted and you're ready to award the contract. You just need money. So we expect you to have sent us that request by those time on target dates. And then we follow over into execution. And this is the easy part if we've done everything on the front end correctly. So the first thing you lay in all those requirements, right? We just had all those priorities. Now we have all these different quarters that we laid them into, and that kind of builds a spend plan for us, right? And as I mentioned, it helps you allocate your resources. But another advantage of that is it gives us a burn rate, right? So we know when we expect to award stuff, so we can ask for quarterly authority at the right amount of time. I saw a question just pop in: if no budget is passed, how do you execute in quarter one? That's a good question, but that's part of this. Why we're going to lay that in. We're going to work closely with SAF FM and see what it's looking like, as well as the PALM process and where we're at. And we're going to adjust that quarterly authority and quarterly time on target accordingly based on what they think we're going to be able to have. And the worst part is, the worst thing that could happen is we have a lot of bids on the shelf and then we're just waiting on money. If we're at that point in the process, we're winning, all right, because we're going to send you money as soon as it comes to us. So once we have that established burn rate, though, as I mentioned, it helps us get quarterly authority. It also helps us track obligations. Obviously the goal is going to be that the green line that's popping up is above the blue line. That means we're over executing ahead of schedule. That's a good thing. But at the end of the year, and here's the benefit of a 2-year IPL, if we get to that fourth quarter and we have more projects ready to award than we have money for, that's not a big deal. In the years past, when you work this through your MAJCOM, it's an unfunded drill, fill or kill authority. So all that work, all that effort to develop a requirement and take it up to award, and then we find out that we didn't get money, so what do we do with it? We put it on the shelf and maybe bring it back to life next year around this time and to do the drill again. Well, the 2-year IPL, we're not going to do that. So every project on that list, we are going to execute. And if we don't execute it at the end of year, we're going to execute it in the first quarter of the next fiscal year. So what does that do for us? It drives our obs up in the first quarter so that we can show some early obligations, give the FM community confidence in us and our ability to execute. And that's a good thing, because when we go ask for more money down the road, they're going to be more than willing to give it to us. All right, so way ahead, what does this look like? We're working 3 CTOs at any one time. As you've seen, hopefully, from your MAJCOMs, from your MAJCOMs this week. Dave shared it. The FY4, or excuse me, yeah, the FY14 CTO has been published and sent out to you guys to execute. So we are in full up in execution of that, and I understand it's tight timelines, and we'll talk a little more about that for 14 on the next slide. But then you look at their FY15 CTO, all the installations out there, if they haven't already, have looked at all their requirements and developed their target list, right? They've had their facilities boards prioritize the requirements and submitted those to the MAJCOMs. So we're in the process right now for FY15 of building that targeting list. And as soon as we get it in the mid-May timeframe, we're gonna start applying weaponeering. And then actually in the FY16 program, as we're running full up through the 15, we're starting on 16. We're developing the business rules, taking a look at the strategic intent and changing that so that we can capture the appropriate targets through the process. And then again, looking forward to 2015, you can kind of see that we get on a little more consistent battle rhythm. The key date there is in this fiscal year, we're going to approve the FY15 CTO on 1 July. That's our target date. But in future years, we're going to move that date even further to the left to mid-April. So then we will truly have an end-of-year program that consists of our next year's program. And what I mean by that is if in April of 2015 we publish the FY16 program or 16 CTO, well, we're going to issue authority at that time on some of those requirements. So the hopes are that after a quarter of going through acquisition, when we get into the fourth quarter, we're going to have some requirements actually ready to buy down a year earlier than intended. And so we'll be at a proactive approach versus reactive, how we are right now. So FY14 CTO cycle. What is that? You know, walking through that. So this was approved with limited coordination. The memorandum was signed by CE, our civilian leader here at AFCEC, by SAF FM, the money guys, and by SAF AQ, the contracting folks up at the Pentagon. They signed that memo, and you can see in the first sentence on it, it says you have the authority to advertise every requirement out there. Some of the feedback we were getting is that the authority that had been given was unclear or didn't count because we didn't have everyone on board. It was just sent out by us locally. Well, this tripartite agreement fixes that. And the other piece of this is not collaborative, and we know that this cycle because we didn't have time. We're trying to right the ship because we've been a little behind on our obligations, and we had to do something a little drastic this time to get us on the right track. But rest assured that in years forward, the future years, this is going to be a better process, and you're going to have more time on your side. Weaponeering. So the weaponeering piece, how did we do that? We've received some of those questions so far. We did two things. We looked in ACES and in ACES PM to see what the project managers at the bases had put in there for that construction agent, contract method, etc. And then we've also done a good bit of coordination on probably 75% of it already through our facilities directorate here in terms of what you guys planned and how you plan on executing requirements. But bottom line, if it's wrong, and we received feedback after the webinar this morning that there were some that were wrong, let us know, and we'll change it and we'll readjust fire accordingly. Time on target date, that's probably the one that's more pressing to y'all. How did we decide that? So here's the process that was used. If authority to advertise was issued by us, by AFCEC, prior to February, your time on target was equal to 30 April 14. And we did that because you should not have been asking for authority to advertise unless your project had been coordinated on by contracting and they were ready to accept it and start work on the acquisition based on our business rules. So if that was truly the case, then you should be ready to award by 30 April. If the Corps, NAFAC, or maybe GSA or someone else that we MIP our money to is the execution agent, then your time on target is 30 April also. Now, we don't expect to have a contract award document in our hands then, but we do want you to request the money so that we can send it over to them. That helps us show obligations this year, but again, you'll still need to track that towards final contract award, but it helps us show a little better improvement to the folks up at the Pentagon. And then all other requirements that we hadn't issued ATA or that weren't going external Air Force, we used the program amount and some published guidelines from the 72nd here, the contracting squadron here at AFCEC, to kind of lay that out, expectations. Everything from 80 to 150 days based on whether it was a construction task order versus a design task order, and then based on the PA amount, whether it was under 500,000, up to $1 million, etc. And then the last part of this, corrective action plans, right? In what the documents that were sent out, it says if you are not going to miss your time on target date, you need to submit us a corrective action plan within 7 days, duly signed by your squadron commander, your C squadron commander, and your contracting squadron commander, so that everyone's on the same page of how you're going to get to your time on target and how you're going to attain it prior to the end of the fiscal year. In future years, you'll see that that's 30 days beyond your time on target date. But this year, we just want to know, no kidding, how are you going to get there if you can't meet those dates? But bottom line, please track towards those dates. We need to spend our money, we need to show obligations, or we're at risk of losing it. So it's important that we track to those dates to the best of our ability. All right, FY15 cycle. So this is kind of the long-range plan. Initial CTO is in development right now, as I mentioned a couple slides ago. We're expecting inputs 15 May from all the MAJCOMs and installations based on their targets, their priority lists. We already started a CTO working group to start looking at some of the requirements that we've received so far, so that we can start applying weaponeering time on target criteria to develop a draft CTO. So our goal between 15 May and 1 June is to have that draft CTO ready for you guys to take a look at and hack off on. We're going to send it out to the installations MAJCOMs, give them 2 weeks to address any errors or changes that need to be made, and then once that's completed, we're going to take the CTO through the formal governance process and get it approved in the 1 July time frame and get it out to you guys to start executing that 15 program. With that, you can actually expect, and our hope is that we'll be able to release some additional authority to maybe address some of those first quarter time on target requirements, maybe the smaller Sabre IDIQ type stuff, or our FY16 design program, because we can do those pretty quickly. But our goal is to buy down some of that FY15 stuff in the fourth quarter of this year if everything works out right. The CTO working group, we're going to be meeting on a regular basis at a minimum quarterly, if not more. The keys there, it's going to be a collaborative group across the engineers, the money folks, as well as contracting, JA, all the people that have a piece in the pie, in the execution pie. And we're going to do a few different things there. Some keys are coordinate release, make sure that we have enough requirements out on the street to meet our obligation goals, because we know stuff gets canceled, we have bid overages, different things. We're also going to make sure that the appropriate quarterly authority is available to meet time on target. If everyone's coming in early based on their time on targets, well, we want to know that, and we want to be prepared to go ask for more money, more quarterly authority. And that's what the working group's function will be in that process. And then we're also going to be transparent. That's one thing that we really pride ourselves on here, is we're going to maintain the CTO. It's going to be active. You're going to be able to access it, and we're going to have it out there published so that you're seeing the same things that we're seeing. And times on target, one thing that I hit on a little bit, it's all going to be funded first come, first serve. So that's a key takeaway here. Just because you have a time on target in the third quarter doesn't mean you need to wait. If you have the resources available to execute it earlier, we'll get it ready earlier, because we're going to fund it as soon as it comes in. And that might play a factor at some point if, as someone mentioned before, our budgets, we don't have a budget approved, or we have sequestration and we don't have money. That would be a benefit to you if you're ready early. But that's the behavior that we want to drive. If you miss your time on target, you're added to the high-risk portfolio, and that requires the corrective action plan that we discussed earlier. And if you miss that date, 30 days after your time on target, then your project moves below the line. And what we mean there is that we're not going to consider those requirements anymore till end of year, if at all. Depending on the dollars available at end of year. But that's a key. You're going to have up to 6 months, if not more, to get after these requirements. That should be plenty of time to execute any of these targets on the list. And if you're not making it and you're missing your date and you can't get the 30-day extension, then you're at risk of losing dollars. And so that's an expectation that we want to lay out there for you. And the last piece there is an emergent requirement. We have pop-ups come up all the time. Again, that's a role of the CTO working group. We're going to take a look at those as they come in. We have a standard web-based process to approve them and integrate them into the CTO upon approval. We'll set time on target dates as they come in so that we can lay out expectations and add them to the program. All right, so the other piece, the feedback that we've received so far after the F14 CTO was scheduled was, well, hold up, what about this weaponeering? How are we going to do that? And so from our perspective, we're looking at three things, and kind of in this order. First is construction method, second is execution agent, and the third is the contract vehicle that we're going to use. All right? Excuse me. So first off, construction method. The key takeaway here is we're going to let the requirement drive the method, not the process. So you look down at the arrows on the bottom. You know, in the past, when we had individual MAJCOMs doing their unfunded drills, they would build a list about this time every year and have a one-to-end list, and they would start issuing fill or kill authority on some of those requirements. But the key was that you had to have it ready by the fourth quarter if you wanted to be considered for funding. Well, if we hadn't done any work on these requirements, we hadn't completed any design, we had poorly defined requirements, what did we do? Well, we went in there with a design build and said, well, we'll get it awarded and then fix it through mods during the process, right, so we can take advantage of the dollars. That's not a good way of doing business, and that's letting the process drive how we execute a requirement. After this, through the CTO process and the 2-year IPL, we're going to be able to have a consistent approach. Funded prioritization, that's a key takeaway, which we're not doing unfunded anymore. These are funded requirements, so take your time and do it right with the right resources. You know, so the three types that we kind of laid out there, single discipline, simple scope, that's you guys' bread and the butter, right? That's the installation, what we're good at, and we would love if our whole program consisted of those, you know, IDIQ, SABRE type stuff, the easy stuff, because we can do it quickly and we can do it well. But those are no-brainers. Take advantage of it, maximize it, and use it. You know, design, build. Here's the key change here is that we want to be deliberate when we use design, build. If the requirement's less than $5 million, relatively simple, then maybe design, build's the right way to go. But if it's not, then we want to take our time, we want to pull back the reins, and we want to go design, bid, build, and make sure we got it right. And some of the key points that we're going to be looking at in the weaponeering process is that if this is a historic facility renovation, we want you to do design, bid, build, because we have enough knowledge, enough history to know that that's areas where we, as a career field, get in trouble in terms of execution. If the requirements are greater than $5 million, there should also be design, bid, build, especially for a renovation project, unless there's a compelling reason not to. So that's our expectation, is that you're going to be looking for design dollars one fiscal year with a follow-on construction the next fiscal year if your requirements meet that threshold. And the last one, taking that even a step further, because time is on our side with the 2-year program, is if it's greater than $10 million, then we want an analysis of alternatives, and we want to invest some dollars on the front end to do some additional requirements development to make sure that we got it right. If we're going out there in a $100 million runway project, well, before we go invest all those dollars, we want to make sure that we've considered every possible alternative that might achieve the same objective for a lot less money, right? So we need to spend the time on the front end planning that out. But the key takeaway to all of this is the CTO allows us to plan ahead and do things right. We don't need to game it just to get the dollars obligated. All right, step 2, selecting an execution agent. So the key here is that we want, it's kind of like a waterfall, right? We want to optimize the base first. If you guys have the capability and capacity at the installation, then by all means do it. You know your installation, you know the requirements, you're familiar with the local procedures. It just makes sense. There's a lot of efficiencies in you guys doing that. And if that's the case and that's what you want to do, then make sure you tell us through way of the business rules and submitting your targets. You need to put that data in ACES, because we're going to go be looking for it. You know, that's how we're going to build our straw man, is we're going to pull that data out of ACES. We're going to look at who you're looking for your agents, and we're going to use that to build the straw man and then start identifying any disconnects. Step 2, if you guys can't do it, we'll send it over to us. Between AFCEC, AFICA, we have a pretty good capability, and we have a decent amount of capacity as well. And there's some key areas where, you know, we might have a PM forward where we already have resources in place to supplement you. There might be a core competency, complex facility renovations, airfield-related requirements that we're good at and we need to be good at. Or maybe we have a historical presence, you know, maybe a base maintenance contract base where you don't have a capability locally, and we've been doing a lot of your requirements for you in the past. Well, we want to maintain that relationship. But the key there is, if you don't have capacity and capability at the base, we want you to come to us, and we want to tap out our capacity before we go external. And when we do go external, we want to make sure it's for the right reasons, whether that's a resident office that has a lot of reach-back support, whether it's a district been very involved in multiple projects on that base or has a large MILCOM program, or maybe tapping into some of those centers of excellence out there. And lastly, the contract vehicle, right? First things first, take advantage of the tools that you have in your toolbox, whether that's your own multiple award contract, your IDIQ, Sabre. If they're the right fit for a requirement, use them. Step two, though, is if they're not quite the right fit and you need a little help, maybe you don't need the whole requirement taken over, but take advantage of the tools that we have out there for you. And we'll get the link out. I don't know if it's published. We had it earlier, but we're going to publish it out there of all the AFCEC contract vehicles available to you. But an A&E is a perfect example. If you don't have an A&E IDIQ or access to one and you need design dollars, well, come talk to us because we have a pretty robust capability here. Or if your project managers are a little tapped out and you're doing all right and getting contracts awarded but need help on oversight, well, guess what? We can also provide Title II through our contract vehicles. So there's our huge tools to you that we can fund through the centralized program. We just need you to communicate with us and tell us you need the help. And the last piece there is our large contracts, our SATOCs, our HERCs. Those are vehicles out there, and we have the tools and resources to execute requirements for you if you can't do it at the installation. But bottom line, it's all about the right vehicle for the job and maximizing the use in an efficient approach at all the requirements, or excuse me, all the vehicles out there to make sure that we're executing the most efficient way possible. All right. So last piece, and I touched on some of this already. Here's where we're at in the FY15 CTO. 15 May is the big date when we're going to get all the targets. We're going to be working crazy hours here to get the draft CTO weaponeered and out to you guys. When we're reaching out there, the key stomp there is communicate with us. When we're reaching out to you, talk to us. We want to communicate. We want to get it right on the first time so that when the draft goes out, it's a simple chord for you guys. But when we send you that draft, if we've whiffed on an area and you have a compelling reason that we're way off base, then we're going to have that conversation as well, with the goal of taking care of all that, coordinating it, and getting it up for final approval on 1 July. As far as decision authorities, we get our strategic intent from the Installation Executive Council with all those big wigs, including your MAJCOM deputies. The targeting process, the Air Force Civil Engineer is the IPL approval authority, advised by the CE Council, so that's how we develop our targeting list. And then the weaponeering and CTO process, the tripartite approval agreement that we have between AFCEC, AFICA, and SAF FMB. That is the approval authority on that weaponeering process when we take it from target to execution. And lastly, we build the business rules here in AFCEC, and so if there's stuff that you're doing out there, if this CTO, if there's areas you think we can improve it or process improvements, you have a better way of doing business, please share that with us. Our goal here is to take care of everything for the Air Force and do it the best way we know how, and we can't do that without input from the installations. All right, so with that, I breezed through that. I'm sure you don't have any questions. Just kidding, I see the chat box filling up. But at this time, if you've got questions, start typing them in down there, and we're going to go through some of those that we already have out there and answer them. So I'll go through them, read them out loud, and then kind of give you our perspective. So at our base, we have 4 projects in the AFCEC released list, but we have over 20 projects in preparation. They come from MAJCOM, Wing Commander, etc. Problem is, this centralized process doesn't help with the other 80% of the work the base is responsible for. We foresee balancing this work from different sources being a problem. If we are centralizing, why isn't all of it centralized? Go ahead.
Hey, this is Lieutenant Colonel Meeker, and as Zach said, the folks who built this just came from the base level, and we know. A little bit of background if you're not familiar. The centralized portfolio in FY13 was $1 billion. It'll probably go north of that in 14. And as the Installation Mission Sports Center stands up, we expect that to grow, for better or worse. So we know, we very, very well know that we are a small piece of your plan at the base. And that you've got more projects to serve than just the ones on the CTO. And so what I would say is that We can't necessarily help you with your 80%, obviously, with the other 80%. We hope that some kind of repeatable process is useful, but all that we can control is giving you a consistent, deliberate, repeatable process for the 20% of your workload that we do influence. So in our minds, and the way we've approached this is, we can't solve all your local issues, but we can do our best to make managing this piece of your pie a little bit easier. And that's really what we're trying to bring to the table. That's really all we can do for you from here.
And in addition to that, that's where we talk about capacity and capability. If you guys can't get there locally, well, talk to us. We have a lot of avenues out there, and that's the purpose. We're here to support and equip you guys with the tools you need. So if you need help executing, that's why we exist.
So 50 Cons asked can the wing commander decide there's a local priority that takes precedent? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to take all your local stuff, you're going to take the centralized stuff, and as leadership in contracting, and especially in contracting, you're going to come up with your entire list. And maybe this sounds naive, or this is our idea, so we love it. But if I'm sitting in a contracting squadron, of course you're going to have your entire fiscal year's program, what you expect to go through, and you're going to prioritize the whole thing. But now you can do that with our expectations and time on target dates and process involved. And when we do the weaponeering piece up front, we set these time on target dates. You need to give us feedback that, hey, I'm at maybe I'm at Cannon Air Force Base and we have a huge AFCEC bed down going on, and we've got all this other work, so you need to give us a little leeway on our time on target dates for the centralized program. Right? That's that dialogue you need to give us. But yeah, you're going to absolutely blend all of your requirements into this. But we ask you that for our little slice of the pie, here's a process you can use.
All right, next question from Lieutenant Lager, I guess it is, at Beale. It would be nice to see how the design timetable falls into all this. Late release of design ATA or CA causes late changes in the base's weaponeering. If we're banking on enough time to execute 100% design but risk losing the construction contract the following year because of late release, a shift might need to happen from design bid build to design build. Will AFCEC release overlay milestones for design? So, good question, and the key answer to that is get through this year and maybe part of next year, but by the time we're in 16, this will be null and void, right? So what we've done so far in 15, for your 15 program, is we've issued over $30 million of authority and probably close to $10 million of design dollars already for FY15 construction projects. So the folks can go get after those now, so that once we enter FY15 and the construction year, we're ready to rock and roll. But that's the key, and that's why we want to get on a 2-year program. So, for example, when we approved the 1 July list, the FY15 CTO, on that is going to be maybe $30 million of 16 design. So we're not expecting to execute those construction requirements till FY16. So you're going to have, 3 months in FY14 plus all of FY15 to go through the design and acquisition process, so that when we hit FY16, you're ready to ready to award a requirement.
Next is that food debate with 56 Cons.
We'll hold on.
Let's just
You want to skip that
answer
one?
the straddle. Let's get straddle question.
Okay. What was this one?
All right, will time on target dates consider RPMC and sustainment less than 5 million projects workloads at the base? Not right now. I'm guessing this is for what's managed through the centralized portfolio, which is large sustainment projects, as well as our RNM energy demo, different focus funds. So future though, depending on what we look like as an Air Force, if that large sustainment threshold goes away, then yes, we will take that into account, but not for right now. If the Corps or NAFAC is the execution agent, you want a funds request by 30 April regardless of MAJCOM received low bid prior to 30 April. So yes, that is our goal for FY14, right? Our obligations are in the dumps. We're, I don't know, not even 20%, and we're over halfway through the fiscal year, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with it. I wasn't necessarily at the base when I was there, but we have to have all 80% of our our program funded by the end of July, or obligated by the end of July, and we're a long ways from that right now. So by sending dollars to the Corps, we get them obligated. Understand that's not what we want to do. We'd like to wait till we have bid in hand. However, we need to make a strategic move at this time to get those dollars over there. And hopefully that'll motivate our core NAVAC districts to work a little harder since they have money in hand. All right, next question. If we're looking at funding up to end of first quarter, will we be doing more normal straddle, 31 December bid acceptance versus special straddle? Yes, the answer there is yes. So in the CTO memo that went out, it says there that please extend your bids through first quarter so that we can do just that. You know, our goal is to have more requirements ready to fund than we have dollars available at the end of the year. So we're going to be looking to award a lot of that in the first quarter of the next fiscal year. If the base selects AFCEC as the agent in ACES, when would the base receive confirmation that the projects have been accepted by AFCEC? Well, when we build the straw man, that's the first thing that we're looking at from AFCEC perspective is what are those requirements that have been tagged or that the base is asking us. So immediately in that mid-May time frame, if not sooner, if it's already in ACES, we're going to start engaging in those conversations to make sure that we're the right fit for those requirements. But the goal is, you know, when we get that draft DIPL and we get it out to CORD, we've had a lot of those conversations, and we're going to finalize that. And when the CTO is approved, you have that confirmation that we are the agent and we're tracking that. Question popped in: how would tenants submit projects through the host command or our command? You have a host. You know, that to answer that question, there's a host installation. So all those requirements from a tenant should be competing locally on the facilities board there for consideration in the centralized process. And then from there, it rolls up to major command. The host major command, and it's their job to advocate for those requirements. But we would expect those to follow the same path as all of the other local requirements. The extension dates on proposal is only for the list of projects on the CTO. Correct? Yeah, and yes, that is correct. That is the 14th CTO as it stands right now. So when we get into FY15, and I didn't touch on this earlier, you know, our goal is, as we're having quarterly working groups, and the CTOs, it's going to be a living document, right? So we're going to publish the first one in 1 July. Well, if we're lucky and have a good end of year and buy down most of our 16 design and some of our 15 construction, well, we're going to republish the CTO on a quarterly basis, and it's going to address that. It's going to take off those requirements that were bought down, and we're going to add new requirements with new time on target dates to the bottom of the list. But yes, for now, we're shooting to what's on that list. All right, so we have a contracting question in here, and Brian's going to take that.
Yeah, this is Brian Stives with AFICA 56 Cons. We'll work that issue. The ATA has been staffed and signed at the SAF level. As far as what my assumption was the -18. If that's wrong, we'll go back and do our homework and figure that part of it out to see what applicable clauses have to go in the contract if you're doing that contracting in advance of funding. But I think the ATA covers most of it, so we'll look into that, and I'll get back with you. I don't know who's specifically there to respond to, but we'll send it out to the entire group as a whole on the contracting side to make sure we've got our bases covered.
Thanks, Brian. All right, I don't see any other questions out there. So again, if you got any questions on this briefing at all that come up after this, please let us know. Please reach out to myself, to Brian, or any of us here at AFCEC. You're familiar with your counterparts in facilities. They're sitting in the room too. Any questions at all? We got nothing to hide here. We want to share, and we want to collaborate with you and make sure that this is the best we can do for the Air Force. So with that, we have nothing else here. Again, this will be recorded and published out on YouTube, and oh, we might have one coming in. We'll wait. Ellsworth, everyone's waiting on you. Just kidding. Oh, all right. Else, for projects that we already have bids on, do we have to change bid acceptance date? No.
You got bids.
No, if you got bids, send them to us.
Request funds ASAP.
Request the funds ASAP, and I'll bet you will be amazed by how fast we can get you the money. All right, with that, we're out here in San Antonio. Thank you all very much for joining in. And again, if we can be of help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Take care.